Hey horror fans, welcome back to Room 237, coming at you with another Universal Monster film review. And I know this kind of looks different. I kind of wanted the camera more this way than this way, so I'm trying something different. Well, let me know how it looks compared to the other videos. But I've been tackling, it's going to take me a while to get used to, the Mummy series. And I'm on the third film. Technically the third film, but the second of the actual series, and this time it is The Mummy's Tomb, which came out 2 years later in 1942, and I'll just say this first. Directed by Harold Young, this time instead of Tom Tyler as Kharis, we got the monster man of the 40s himself, Lon Chaney Jr. Which, by this time, because 1941, he had his huge breakout as Larry Talbot, aka the Wolfman, also the Wolfman. And before that, he was kind of a nobody. Like, he wasn't even going by Lon Chaney. He was going by his real name, which I believe was Claude Chaney. He is Lon Chaney Jr., biologically, but yeah, I'm pretty sure his real name was Claude. Creighton Tull Chaney. But he wasn't getting any jobs. He was going nowhere, and so he just took his father's name, put Junior on it, and he got the Wolfman, and he was the man of 1,000 faces for the 40s. He was the new Lon Chaney Sr. He was the new Boris Karloff, even though Karloff was still getting jobs. But Chaney was the new guy for makeup. But you would never know it because, unlike the Wolfman, which even the Wolfman, he was completely unrecognizable with the makeup. But this was just a big rubber mask. I guess Chaney didn't really care for the character. He just kind of took it for a job. And he didn't really like the makeup process. And the legend, of course, Jack Pierce, up until the late 40s when Universal switched over and they just fired his ass for no reason. It took him 8 hours to apply all the bandages, and he didn't use the painstaking cotton-based makeup as he did for Tom Tyler, so it was just kind of like a one-piece rubber mask. It looks alright, and I would have to say that only one of the few good things about this film would be Lon Chaney. It's not that he really brings anything new to the character, except he's a bit more like a zombie-like. Like, he doesn't just walk around like that. You know, he kind of has, like, undead kind of movements. And he is bigger and more imposing than Tom Tyler was, which was a common positive note that was given upon its initial release. And then the only other positive would be the atmosphere, which I'll get to. But this whole movie, directed by Harold Young, starring some of the same people from The Mummy's Hand, such as Dick Foran as Steve Banning, George Zucco as Andoheb, Wallace Ford as Babe Hansen. He was Jensen before, now he's Hansen. Don't know why. And yeah, that was pretty much everyone from the first film that's in this one. Peggy Moran did not return as the magician's daughter. Her character had died. But I think it's alluded to that her and the Steve Bannon character got married. and she passed away because this movie takes place 30 years after the original. Even though they didn't make it look like 1970, it still looks very much the same period. But the first like 10 minutes is just Steve Banning as an old guy telling the story of the last film to some people. And at first, I was thinking, well, that's kind of a cheap way to jack up the runtime, because The Mummy's Hand at 1 hour and 7 minutes is the longest one. All the other ones are an hour and 1 minute, like exactly. Hour 1 minute, hour 1 minute, hour 1 minute. Abbot and Costello is hour 20 minutes. So they are all forgivably short. I'm just having a hard time getting into this series, because this movie, if the 1932 Karloff film was part of this series and this was the part 3, it would have been Alien 3 all over again. Why? Because all the characters from the last film, The Mummy's Hand, gets killed off like they're nothing. Spoiler alert. So yeah, the first 10 minutes or so, he's telling the story, and you get this truncated recap of the last film, which they kind of botch up the editing, because like when Babe shoots Andoheb in the last film, he said, I'm going to give you to the count of 3, and he counts to 3. In this, he's like, I'm going to give you to the count of 3. And Andoheb is still alive after being shot a bunch of times and rolling down the stairs. He lived to be an old guy. And even though it seems like a cheap way to jack up the runtime, back then there was no home video. So if you didn't get to go see The Mummy's Hand, you missed it forever. It was gone up until the 80s, I guess, upon home video. So they often did recaps, even though I don't really remember the Frankenstein films doing that much, or the Dracula films. Like, at all, really. I mean, you might get like a caption or an opening crawl or something. But from that point on, it is literally the same film. Because you have Andoheb, played by George Zucco with old guy makeup. Looks just like the old guy from the last movie. Black robe. He's passing down his position to a younger guy. Mehmet Bey, played by Turhan Bey, who was, I think, the last surviving the last surviving Universal horror star. I'm not sure what else he's been in, but he died in 2012 at the age of 90. I don't really think he was in any other Universal Monster films other than this. So I guess just the last surviving person to be in a Universal horror film. So there's that about him. And not only does he give him the task to take over looking over Kharis, but he gives him the task of using Kharis to go after and kill everyone involved in the banning expedition of the previous film. Why 30 years? Why it had to be his predecessor? I have no idea, because the film had to happen. The script said so. And literally, so then it's in this fictional town of Mapleton, Massachusetts. And earlier when I said the atmosphere is one of the positives about this film, maybe they realized that their Egyptian atmosphere of the previous film wasn't that good. The 1932 film, I felt like I was in Egypt. The set design, the costumes, the production really felt like an Egyptian film or a film set in Egypt. The Mummy's Hand, not so much. So it felt like they were really going back to basics because this has foggy cemeteries, foggy forests, dark alleyways. It's almost like if you took the Mummy and put him in like a Wolfman or Dracula film, which is fine. Kind of out of place, but at least it looks different because the story is almost essentially the same. And everyone he kills from the last movie, it's like Alien 3. You have all these heroes, calling people from the Mummy's Hand heroes, but I mean, they did do stuff, so I got to give them credit. Not to the level of Aliens, but then Alien 3 comes and they all just died like nothing. So yeah, he always manages to get them in a corner and then strangle them. And I do like Lon Chaney's movements, like kind of twisted and doing some real, what you would expect, like an undead person to kind of walk like. They did make him look, for continuity's sake, kind of burnt because of the ending of the last film. The comedy from the last one was kind of toned down a bit. Some of the other characters is more like the newer characters is like Steve Bannon's sister, played by Mary Gordon. I guess he has a girlfriend. Or was that? I'm just reading over this real quick because I had a really... Oh, wait. I had a really hard time getting into these films. So, I just want to make sure. John Banning, so it must have been like his son. Some things I kind of missed. It's not that I didn't get the film. I'm used to Batman and comic book pages say where I have to explain myself that I understood something. Just, I missed a couple facts. But, so, whoever this woman is, Isabel Evans, played by Elise Knox, the Turhan Bey guy, the new watcher of Kharis, or keeper of Kharis, he has a thing for her, and he wants to bring Kharis to bring him to her. And make her his bride as the high priest of Karnak. Or it will make him the high priest of Karnak. But because of, the sort of Abbott, or, the sort of Costello, dumbassy guy from the last movie, Babe. He was the one that kind of sparks the idea that I think this is the work of a mummy. So then all the townspeople become convinced that if not a mummy, just some recent Egyptian immigrant, meaning Bey, is at least involved. And Bey just gets gunned down by the sheriff. And I'm reading about the production because there was something else I wanted to say. Goddamn tablet. And and of course, they stop him with fire again. Like, I don't really know if there's any other way to really stop a mummy, or at least back then. And the house that he's in is burnt down. Well, this is interesting because I I just saw this and I kind of missed it because I wasn't paying attention at the end. But the younger Banning and Isabel get married at the end. Then he receives his draft notice for World War II. So that would have put this movie possibly in present time of 1942, which means the previous film must have been in like 1910, 1912, somewhere around there. You never would have guessed. It doesn't tell you that. If it did, I missed it. This movie it's a complete rehash of the first one. They give you everything you need to know about the previous one in the first 10 minutes. I mean, sort of like what Evil Dead 2 does. They had more money, so they kind of truncated and redid the first Evil Dead in the beginning of Evil Dead 2, and then just continued with the story. The difference is, both Evil Deads are excellent films. Both are in my top 5 favorite movies of all time. I can't say the same for these films. I still like the Karloff one. The original, The Mummy, I can still say is a good movie. I would say that The Mummy's Tomb is better than The Mummy's Hand, but not by much. It's really just Lon Chaney and the atmosphere and the cinematography of this one. It's really uninspired and nothing new. And I still got 2 more movies and then the Abbott and Costello one. I have to admit, this is probably, even though there was one or two Rants in Frankenstein, the Frankenstein series, one in Dracula. Was there one in Dracula? The only one for Wolfman was, She-Wolf of London, because that's just a misleading film. But this might be the only one that's almost all Rants. Again, like I said in my last review, I wasn't the biggest fan of, the Mummy as a character, even as a kid. And it hasn't really carried over much into adulthood. I like the Karloff film, but that's about it. But anyway, that's The Mummy's Tomb. I know these are not very informative, but I mean, they're just over an hour long. They're pretty short, which they're forgivably short. I do like that, but not my cup of tea, I guess. Even for Universal monster films, which I generally love. But anyway, that's The Mummy's Tomb. Thank you for watching. Oh, and be sure to let me know about this new camera angle, if I should keep it like this or go back to that. Whichever you guys like better. Just let me know. And thank you for watching.